Hi, this is Mike Verta. Somebody asked me a question about my training regimen. I do a really intensive amount of training every day. And they asked, when you're a young composer and you're starting out, how do you balance all that time that you'd want to spend improving your craft with the time you actually need to spend on gigs, working and making money? The short answer to that is you don't. When you start out, part of your training is learning to work in compromised contexts, which is what it's like working in Hollywood. And some of that means being able to summon your craft on command. Some of that means being able to deal politically with all the kinds of people that you'll encounter in situations where people who really don't have a business telling you what to do musically will. And, you can't lose your mind in that and go all Bakersfield chimp. You have to be able to hold it together and be pleasant and fun to work with. And those are skills that are equally as important. I'd argue more important than all the other musical things that you have time later to practice. Making that money is it's important, not just practically, but it's also important as an artist, because we all have that angst when we start out. Am I going to be able to do this? Am I going to be able to actually make a living at this? But you also have the freedom of not being on the radar yet. When you start out, nobody knows who you are, essentially. They're always scanning your IMDb credits every day, and they're not looking at your website every day. So you have a lot of freedom to kind of do whatever you want. When I started out, in all honesty, when I was starting out, I was doing stuff like, I was doing softcore porn, basically. I was writing stuff for Playboy and Cinemax. I was doing all that, not under my name, but I was doing it, and I was making some money in it. Because I had, frankly, grown tired of eating ketchup packets and sleeping in a car with no gas in it. So I was doing those sorts of things. But also, too, and this was in the early 90s, and I don't know if it's this way anymore, but Muzak was a thing where if you could get an in, and I got an in, if you can get an in and you could get your stuff accepted, the royalty payment on that was great. It would be like essentially $1,000 per year per song if you could get it, and get the system worked. And I plugged right into that, and actually had a benefactor who financed these little recording sessions I would do every weekend. I'd record 6 or 8 tunes. I'd write them just during the week, record them with a sax guy and a guitar guy on weekends. And I had a really high approval rate. I had something like 90, 95, 96% approval rate. And so I put 150 some songs in the Muzak system, which I still collect. Those are still in the system. Those are a huge portion of my royalty income today. I did that sort of stuff. I did anything, because nobody was looking at me yet, and I know now nobody cares really. But there was money coming in, and so there was some comfort there, and I wasn't a dead ass broke poor musician anymore. And then I had an opportunity to focus on more of the craft. There's other things that I did too. I actually took it another step further. I'll just say, in addition to filling the Muzak library and writing softcore music, which is harder than you'd think, by the way. It's hard for me to sustain because they don't really want development, anyway, it's another story. The other thing that I did was I became a visual effects artist. See, I had a lot of friends who were visual effects artists, and I would hear them and see them working on projects and see them valued for their contributions, some computer-generated thing, at like 10 times more than music was, which is still true today. Maybe even worse today. Now they have whole blockbuster features, based around the effects. So it's all about the effects. So they were making 10 times the money, even though the music is where the heart was. So actually, this is one thing I did. I developed a parallel career. And for like 7 years, while I was doing a ton of advertising stuff for Warner Brothers Pictures, I was doing all their trailers and industrials and Show West reels and all this stuff. I would actually pull double or triple duty. I'd write the music, and I'd do all the motion graphics for the piece, and I'd edit it, and I'd do the sound design, and I'd mix it or supervise the mix on it. And so I could control all the money coming in, and where they would never spend money on music, they would give all this money for all these other things. So I would just reallocate it, and I would spend the money on the music. So I would hire these 92-piece 8-call orchestras with Sean Murphy, and we'd record at Todd A.O. and Sony for some trailer. That's what I would do, because I wanted the experience of it, and that's the best way to do it. and they sure as hell wouldn't pay for it. So I sort of tricked them into it. And then you know what I would do is I would bring in the executives, and I'd bring them into these big recording sessions, which if you've ever been, they're really impressive. And I was always thinking that they'd come in and they'd see this and they'd be like, "This is fantastic," and they did. But then they would never. Then you'd think they'd go, "Well, how do we do this next time?" And you just go, "Well, just add another zero to my bill." It wouldn't work. It never worked. But anyway, it's another story. The point is, you do whatever you can do to get that money coming in, because nobody likes being poor. But you don't have to be good to work all the time, and you know that. I think everybody knows that. You're surrounded by people, and this isn't just in music, this is in all fields, where you see people who have long and illustrious careers, really profitable careers, who suck donkey. And you're like, how does that guy, how does he work? Or she, or whatever. I mean, how does that happen? And that's actually a really long and complicated story. But in the end, the boiled down truth is that talent has nothing to do with getting a job or working. Talent is why they'll remember you or not. And that's a philosophical choice that I think, maybe the goal is to get yourself comfortable enough with money that you can even choose that, which is kind of what I did. I structured a lot of things in my career so that it could preserve what I wanted to be able to do musically. There's a lot of things that affect whether or not you'll be successful in your career that you may or may not be in control of. But the truth is, if you really look historically around the people whose musical works have endured, for sometimes generations, sometimes hundreds of years, almost without exception, they're great pieces of music on their own. And you just don't get at that level without all that intensive training. You just can't. Somebody like John Williams writes 2 minutes, at least he purports to write 2 minutes of music a day, which is really, really impressive. Because this isn't 2 minutes of loops, it's 2 minutes of that stuff. But that's why he's so good. Now, he and a handful of others in history are an exception to a rule. They're an exception whereby they're great and they're really successful. They sort of make good on the promise that that's what the world is really about. You're great at what you do, and then you get reward, and then cream rises to the top. And in Hollywood, that's not true anymore. Probably never was. It has, you get hired by friends. You get hired more about what you've done than the quality of what you've done. Most of the, once you get that first job that is gifted to you, almost irrespective of the work that you do, if the project that you're on does well, you'll work again, because people just, let's get those people because it was successful. And then some executive isn't going to get fired for having chosen you if the project goes south because, he was a guy, he did Disney, he'd done Pixar, he was good. It was not my fault. That's really the structure at work there. So don't go training 12 hours a day to get a job. There's other things to do with your time. When I was starting out, I was schmoozing people. I was everywhere, finding people and going to parties and meeting people and drinking with people and doing all this stuff, because ultimately some friend is going to go, you ought to come over and do a thing with it. And that's exactly how it happened. It's happened the way for everybody. Somebody gifts you that first break, or those incremental steps in your career, and you've got to be there in order for that to happen. So you don't have time to be there doing 12 hours a day and all that. So don't sweat it. Get yourself in a comfortable position, find a groove, and then if you want, you can make a choice about, okay, I've made money, I have some money coming in, and then at some point you get enough inertia that the phone is going to ring. Just enough times to at least keep you, afloat or whatever, and then you can make more selected choices about, what do I really want to do musically in this life? And some people they don't care about that. Some people just have their eye on the next, Audi, or a bigger house, and then it's the money that motivates them. And beautiful, that's great. In which case, yeah, man, go be at parties, do that, and then eventually you can just get ghostwriters and do stuff that's based on. There's lots of ways around a career. You know what I mean? You can phone in an A-level 7-8 digits career with almost no talent at all. It happens every day. So don't do it for that reason. But also too, there's something to consider, which is this: For a long spat there, I was living that sort of that fantasy we have where the phone rings all the time and everybody wants to do things, and I was doing that in at least one capacity, and I never slept, and but all this money was coming in and all that. But I noticed something during that, which is that my abilities did not actually get any better. The skill set that I began that long stretch of 7 intense years of work with, I honed my skills. I got more efficient with them. I got better with them. But when you don't work all the time, you have opportunities to reflect on what you've done. You have opportunities to stretch out and try new things. That's a luxury that you just don't get when you're in the middle of working. And it comes at the expense, working all the time is at the expense of this musical growth. And that happens all the time. You look at young composers, especially when they start out, and you can tell when they're young and they're really, really hungry, and their work is just like one film, those first couple films is just so great, and then you can draw the graph of the plateau where they just don't, it's like there's not inventive anymore, and then all of a sudden you start to hear them like rehashing their stuff, and then it starts to go down, and you're like, what happened? That guy was just, what happened? And what happened is, well, man, the phone started ringing. Got to get to it. You got to get to it. And it's you don't want to say no because you're afraid that if you say no, the phone will stop ringing. That's the real fantasy, I think, is to know that you can sort of take time and be selective, and the phone will still ring. But again, these are choices. I don't know where my career is going to go, but I know that I want to be as good as I possibly can be at writing music. Because if I want to have any chance of making a lasting contribution, that's a key component. History doesn't give a crap how much money I made, and they don't care whether I was happy, and they don't care whether or not I had the newest plasma TV or my bills were paid. I mean, we don't know or care about those things in the final analysis. But art has the potential to live, well past your years, and thus make a greater contribution. So if that's more the kind of thing that motivates you, then train 12 hours a day. Because even training 12 hours a day, we've got a long way to go to even be considered in the same breath with the people that inspired us. I believe that. So don't stress about it would be my advice. Make the money and get comfortable so that you can take a breath and hopefully get yourself in a position where you can make a choice about what really motivates you and what really brings you satisfaction and what really the dream of being a musician is about. And maybe you'll find a balance in there, just like a John Williams has or somebody else has, that you can be great and selective and work and make $1 billion and whatever. I mean, that does happen. There's just an awful lot luck and relationships, and there's just a lot that goes into the career part of it, the Hollywood business part of it. And I've only noticed that there's 24 hours in a day. I can't get more than 24 hours out of the day, and I can't be as good as I want to be and do all that stuff. So, but again, maybe that's a little disingenuous because I did that and I got myself in a situation that was, comfortable enough to do that. So, I don't know what that says, but anyway, there it is. I just wanted to give a slightly more in-depth answer to that than I would have taken time to type, and you would have ever taken time to read. It's a forum, after all.